Hey guys, welcome back to the makefile series. Today we're going to be discussing variables, which is something you're going to use if you write more and more sophisticated makefiles, just like any other programming language. So starting off, we have three variables that we set over here, A, B, and C, and we can see the ways we can set them. You can have either no spaces and just a colon and an equal sign. If you want, you can have a space before and after, or just before or just after works as well. But if you have a trailing white space, that gets included in the value of this variable. So when you want to print out these values, or if you want to use them, you put a $sign before, similar to how you would do it in a shell. And for demonstration purposes, I put this bracket, which I actually do most of the time as well. And we can see that if we run this makefile, we will see the letter C with a space after it over here. I'm actually going to change that to an error so we don't run through the entire file as we're debugging it. But let's run through this, and we can see that A and B print out, and the C has that space. Now, this dollar variable name is okay for single variable names, for single character variable names, but if your variable name is more than one character, you need to use parentheses. And you can see that my editor actually notices that issue over here, where I'm setting the DE variable, but when I try to use it, if I don't put any braces or parentheses, then I try to print out $D, which doesn't exist. So it prints out nothing, and then it prints out the capital letter E. So that's what's going on over there. To print out the actual value, DE, then I have to use parentheses or braces. Note that if you have a space, that's okay. Make is going to properly print out, FG. You don't need to wrap it in quotes or anything. And actually, if you do wrap it in quotes, it's going to print out those quotes with the value. So don't put quotes. So let's move on to the next section, but change that back to the info and clear this out. And for the next section, I'm actually going to erase that so we're not confusing ourselves. We have variable types and flavors. So when I said you need a colon and an equal sign, that's a little bit of a lie. You can just put an equal sign if you'd like. Let me move down and change this to an error so we're not confusing ourselves. And yeah, these are the two general types. You'll most of the time use one or the other. Simple variables are variables where the right side gets immediately added or, set to this variable. Recursive values or recursive variables are variables where the right side is stored separately from the variable and it's evaluated wherever the variable is used. So I'll give an example of that in a moment. The next thing we have is the question mark equals. And what this says is that if recursive var is not set, then set it to steal. If it is set, then don't do anything. And notice that we can use, colon equals set it to another variable, and we can use plus equals to append a value. So we're going to say hello world plus equals recursive var, and what that will do is here we set it to hello, and here we'll say hello world. We can also set variables through the command line or through the environment. So if I run this makefile, I can say command line var equals either with the colon equals or just equal. And I can set that to YouTube, for example, and that value will show up over here. It will also override any value that's immediately set. So even if it doesn't have a question mark equals, I can actually override this value or this value, like any of these, I can override it, except if it's a variable that says override. If it has this, then you cannot override it. So let's give that a shot. Overridden var, let me make sure I spell that correctly. And we'll set that to YouTube again. So let me run that. And here we actually print out all of the variables. So their values, their flavors, and their origins. we can see that simple var is hello, recursive var, I didn't set it, I didn't override it, so it's world, and it didn't get set to steal either. Hello world is here, hello and world, and it also has a space. Command line var is what I set from here. It's set to YouTube. The flavor is simple because I use the colon. And overridden var is not YouTube. It is the value that got set from here. You can also note the origin. So this is it's a useful tool when you're trying to debug what's going on. These three were set from the file. So that means that they were set in this actual makefile. They were not read from the environment. Command line var got set from the command line. And overridden var has the override flag set, which means it had to have been set inside of the makefile. So let's discuss what recursive versus simple means at a bit of a deeper level. And I'm going to erase all that again, including the error, and I'll make this into the error. So again, we're not confusing ourselves. Now, over here, I set recursive var date to the result of, or to the value of this string over here. And what this does is it calls a function in make called shell. This is not something that we've learned so far. It's something new, but you can trust me when I say this is a command that runs the arguments in a shell and it returns the result. So if I run this manually, we see the current date in seconds, and that's what this is going to be set to. So we print it out over here, we print out the date, we run this shell function again, and we sleep for 1 second, and then we print out the same thing. So what do we expect to happen? We waited 1 second, as you noticed, and it printed 2 different values. The reason it does that is because it evaluates the right side multiple times. It evaluates it here, and then it re-evaluates it over here. So if you have an expensive operation, you don't want to do it over there. You want to do it once and reuse that same result over and over again. Really, this is only useful if the result of this right-hand side can change over time, or maybe it changes depending on what directory you're in or something like that. Even in those cases, I personally prefer to pre-compute the possible values, store them in different variables, and then use those different variables in the different places. If you ever want to see what the right side is without evaluating it, you can use the value function like this, which is going to print out this part over here, the shell date plus %s. Moving on, we have canned sequences or multi-line variables. And these are variables that really just span multiple lines. You can't do that with a normal variable, but here you can. So typically you would use these if you want to have a common part of a recipe that's shared between multiple rules, or the more common use case is if you're writing a user-defined function. So if you do it this way with define and enddef, it has a recursive definition. You can change it to simple or immediate definition like that, or use recursive again like this. They're all valid syntaxes. I'll leave it like this for now. And if we run that, we can see that as you print it out, it gets printed on multiple lines. So very magical. We'll see more of these in the future. So we can use variables in a bit of a creative way. Here we have 2 variables, my cool var and my nice var. My cool var prints out is cool, my nice var is nice. And when we're using a variable, you can actually dynamically generate the variable name. So here we have our adjective variable set to cool, and we're going to print out adjective cool, and then we're going to print out my something var. So because this is cool, we're going to print out my cool var, which is going to be this value over here. It's going to be cool. We can change this to nice, and it'll print out nice. And we can also do this in reverse. Instead of using this to get a variable value, we can also use this to set a variable value. So here we have the adjective set to crazy, and we can have a variable named my crazy var equals crazy. I'm a little peculiar about the formatting. I know here these are like caps and this is lowercase, but whatever, it is what it is. Let's run that and see what happens. And we can see, yep, cool equals cool and crazy equals crazy. Now, finally, let me erase all that. Finally, sometimes you have a variable that you don't want to evaluate, you don't want to expand immediately, or sometimes you want to avoid expanding whatever variables. But essentially, there are cases where you don't want to immediately use a variable. I came up with one over here. It's a little bit contrived. There are cases that we'll come across in the future where we learn about more advanced topics, but for now, this example will do. What we have is a list variable that says 1, 2, 3. And what we're doing is inside of bash or inside of our recipe, notice that this is all on one line technically because of this backslash over here. We are going to say for I in list. And here, this list refers to this variable up here. It's not a variable in the shell. It's this make variable over here. We're going to say do echo $I. If I say do $I, this is going to refer to the variable named I, but there is no such variable. We didn't do I equals 5 or anything like that. There is no such variable, so it's just going to print out an empty space. What we want to do is we want to use this I over here. So we have to escape that variable, and we have to tell make that this is not a make variable. Don't expand it right now. It's going to mean something later on. So that's why you have to escape the $sign with another $sign. Let's give that a shot. And we can see it prints out 1, 2, 3. And if I remove that, if we try to print $I, it's just going to print 3 empty statements. So as I mentioned, this is a little bit contrived. Please don't use any shell specific syntax in your recipes, especially not loops. There's a comment here about how to avoid loops, but I promise there are going to be cases where you're going to need to escape stuff in the future. So thank you for watching. I encourage you to play around with this makefile on your own. There will be a link to it in the description below. And, have fun, break things, fix things, and learn. So thanks for watching. Hope to see you next time.